Hello and welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine and I'll be your host today. We have an honored guest, and that would be former Mayor Jonathan Rothschild. Jonathan, how are you? There we go. And before we get to that, we had a couple of quick announcements. One from Kathy Ramage, our our membership director, as well as Steve Linder. So go ahead, Kathy.
Hello, everyone. I sure hope you are enjoying this rain. I'm good with one day in a row of rain, so I'm not particularly happy with what we're faced with right now, but that's okay. Anyway, some of you still haven't signed back on or renewed your dues. I'd like to listen to our former mayor, our speaker. What do you have to say about this?
Well, before the meeting, Kathy contacted me and reminded me that I had not paid my dues for this year. So between 11:45 and now, I am back as a current member. And it's very easy. All you have to do is go to Democrats for Greater Tucson website and press one button. You get to Act Blue, press a button, $20, which is not very much, and you're a member. So I'm now a card-carrying member again of DGT.
Excellent. Good job. Good job. And if you don't want to do Act Blue, then you'll want to have Steve Linder's information. Steve, would you give us the information you have?
I believe that that Larry put it into the chat already, but I'll repeat it.
Thank you.
You can send your check to Democrats of Greater Tucson, Post Office Box 41573, and the zip is 85717. But it's in the chat if you need it.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. If you sign up with Act Blue, they will let you know you have been signed up. And if you sign up with Steve, you write them a little thank you note or send them a receipt, right?
Well, I can send them an email.
That would be perfect.
Receipts.
No. That's fine. An email's always good. So thanks everybody for helping out. Don't forget, it's only $20 to be a member of this outstanding group of Democrats. Be well, everyone.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Steve. I see Lucy Messing has her hand up. Please unmute yourself. Do you have an announcement or a question?
I have an announcement. Thank you, Larry. I just want to make everyone aware that we're really in trouble this week in the legislature. They are dropping all kinds of horrible bills in committee, specifically voter suppression, another voucher bill. So if you have your RTS ready to go, you need to go into that and comment, because they're being heard in committees this week. And we need for you to also contact your legislators to let them know how we feel about those voter suppression bills, the voucher bill, and the attacks on the ACC. It's a bad week, folks. And if you need more information, go to Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, and they have the best information for you. And I'll put that in the chat. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Lucy. You make an extremely important point. You know, the Republicans want to end voting by mail. They want to kick off all the voters from the rolls who have voted by mail. And if voting by mail is retained, they want to require you to have to go to a notary to notarize your ballot. So these are all little burdens or major burdens to try to disenfranchise us, and we're just not going to stand for it. So Sandy, back to you.
Right, I think I'm unmuted now. And thank you, Jonathan, for agreeing to speak today. Next week, we have Barbara Warren, who is with the Doctors for a Sustainable Future, and she's going to talk to us about staying safe in great heat that we may be anticipating in coming and saving and helping your neighbors with it. And then following that, we're going to have Susan Bickel from LD9. She's the chair. and she's going to tell us what LD9 is going to be up to for the next couple of years. So please join us. And then I've got a whole list of others, but I'm not going to read them right now.
Thank you, Sandy. We really appreciate very much your hard work to put together our terrific programs. And with that, let me get to our special guest. And that would be former Mayor Jonathan Rothschild. He was the mayor of Tucson from 2011 to 2019. And today he practices law with the firm of Mesh, Clark, and Rothschild right here in Tucson. Jonathan was very active and responsible for a variety of initiatives, including the citizenship campaign to help immigrants become U.S. citizens, community schools program to promote college and career readiness, help for home buyers, providing down payment information, mentored Tucson youth, encouraging more Tucsonans to become mentors, Second Chance Tucson, helping the formerly incarcerated to re-enter society, steps to success to re-enroll dropouts in high school, and one of my favorites, the 10,000 Trees campaign to plant shade trees and to beautify the community. And with that, Jonathan, we welcome you. Let us know what you're up to these days.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I haven't come around as often as I probably should, but every time I do, I really enjoy seeing people who have been working in this area and volunteering for as long or longer than I have. It's really a good thing. And sometimes I wish that those who are coming after us would, understand that we've been here before and done this for a long time. That being said, I was asked really just to talk about the things I'm doing that might be of interest to you. The first thing, and Larry mentioned it, I am practicing law at my law firm, Mesh, Clark, and Rothschild. My partners would not like it if I didn't say that. So we are here to serve all your legal needs. I had a specialty before I went to be mayor of working in the field of estate planning and business law. So I do that. But I've taken on a few other hats, and I've always had the problem of probably taking on more than I should. And then I just get to the point where I've got that much, and then I know. And so some of the other things that I'm doing, the first, which is really of interest, and hopefully it'll be of interest to you, and you can participate to some degree starting tomorrow, is the University of Arizona Law School approached me, I think before I left office, and talked to me about leading an initiative that they wanted to have at the law school, which they call the Democracy and Leadership Initiative. Some folks, alumni of the law school, had come to them. And remember, this is, of course, we're not going to forget, but this is, in probably the beginning of the last presidential campaign. And we want to forget as much as we can, but we can't, who just left that office. And so the concern that some of the donors had, alumni of the law school, had come up with is, how do we get back to, in the public realm, have a conversation around facts and around reason and around pragmatism. And given the new technologies and the challenges that have come with them, how do we deal with all that? And the law school, where, lawyers should be leaders in that field, but so many folks who go to law school now aren't even really able to show that interest. They may have that within them, but there's nothing at the law school giving them the opportunity to show that interest. And so I've been teaching a class on state and local law. I'm now in my third semester of teaching. One of the comments I always make is, when you read the book, or when I read the book, almost in every case, I was able to say, oh, we did something like that. And then my second comment is always, God, I wish I'd known this stuff before we started doing it. So there can certainly be an education for electeds as well when it comes to what the law is. You have a city attorney there, and I've joked with him that sometimes I figured out his job was, now, children, you can't do that. But electeds want to do a lot. And it would be great if young people interested in that field sort of understood the parameters of federalism and the like ahead of time. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. The second is starting tomorrow, and I'm really excited about this. We've got a speaker series, and I'm going to give you a site. I can't put it in chat room because I'm just not that good. But if you go to Eddie Glaude, Glaude Jr., U of A Law School, Eddie Glaude, U of A Law School, you'll probably hit on the full series. But the series can also be found at law.arizona.edu/news/2021/01 National Experts Discuss Law and Democracy, University of Arizona Law Speaker Series. Probably University of Arizona Law Speaker Series will get you there. Everything's virtual, everything's by Zoom. Our first initial kickoff speakers tomorrow night is at 5:30 is Eddie Glaude Jr. He is the chair of African American Studies Department at Princeton University. He's written a number of books. His last book was entitled To Begin Again, which is a kind of a study in history of James Baldwin and what he did, the journey he took. And kind of the theme of the book is, taking all this history, how do we begin again? And I'm looking for him to be fascinating. He's often on Morning Joe and MSNBC and the like. And he's a really strong first kickoff speaker. Our second speaker, I'm just going to run through them real quickly. You can find him or email me. I'll give you my email when we're done. Is February 23rd at 12:15. So it's a lunch at February 23rd. It's Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein was the founder and publisher of Vox Online. He is now moved over to the New York Times, and he's written a book, which I think was a New York Times bestseller, called Why We're Polarized. And it really is a study, both political science and psychology, of how we got to where we are. And, I think people need to understand that there'll always be partisanship, that partisanship is not a bad thing necessarily, but extreme partisanship, unreasonable partisanship, we've seen the effects of that. And I'll say it here, we've seen it on both sides of the aisle. The fact that one side seems to be extremely over the edge doesn't necessarily make that issue better. So he's going to talk about that. He quotes early on in his book a professor at the University of Arizona School of Government Public Policy, Samara Klar. And so we're looking forward to that. On March 23rd, Lawrence Lessig, who's a Harvard law professor and New York Times bestselling author, is going to speak about structural flaws in our current government system, whether that's the Electoral College, whether that's campaign finance. He's got a number of them, including representation and how elections are handled, and also digital technologies, because that's been such an influence. And we're going to close on April 22nd with Janet Napolitano. I don't have to tell you anything about Janet Napolitano. We thought it would be good to have someone who had actually been there and done that. So she's going to close it for April 23rd. Also on March 7th is part of the book festival. So it's going to be on video. It's not going to be, all these are going to be live sessions where you can chat and ask questions or try to. Ann Applebaum, who just got done writing a book called Twilight of Democracy, which I just got done reading. And it's a short book, and I would recommend it to I'd recommend all those authors to everybody, but I recommend that to everybody. She lives in Poland with her Polish husband, who was in one of the Polish governments, and she talks about the comparative, what's going on, and she is a speaker in the book festival series, and that's going to be on tape on March 7th. So it'll just be a tape, but it will be as part of the book festival. But she compares what's happened in Hungary, in Poland, in Britain with Brexit, and in the United States with Trump as kind of a worldwide sort of trend, which is alarming. So that's that. And then the last thing I'm doing at the U of A is we've put together the Marshall Brennan program, named after Thurgood Marshall and William Brennan, two of our better Supreme Court justices from the last century. And that's a program we take U of A law students and we put them in the high schools to teach real basic constitutional law and civics to young people. So that program's kicking off this week. We've got 3 law students and about 11 high school students. So you can imagine right now with COVID, it's a difficult time to start anything new in the high schools, but we're doing it. So if that wouldn't keep me busy enough, one of the things that I really wanted to do, and I think is really important, it kind of goes with this, is I really think that it's important that our next generation of leaders be better prepared than my generation. And when I say that, people just really need to know what they're getting into and how they're getting into it. And so we set up a program last year in conjunction with Greater Tucson Leadership, and we recruit from a pool of 25 to 40-year-olds, maybe 45-year-olds. And they've either been through Greater Tucson Leadership, Hispanic Leadership Institute, or Tucson Young Professionals. Try to get people that just aren't solely in government and try to interest them in being involved, whether that's in a political party, on a school board, as a city council, on a board of supervisors, to the state legislature and beyond. Ours is very much focused on local government. And so we have people in, I'm going to give you a real short list of some of the people that were in last year. Michael Ortega and Jan Lesher representing city and county management. The 3 school superintendents, Gabe Trujillo, Steve Holmes, and Todd Yeager. We are bipartisan or nonpartisan. We do bring in Republicans. We brought in on the same day, and it worked, although they weren't in the same meeting. At the time, it was the chair of the Pima County Democratic Party, the outgoing chair, and the outgoing chair of the current Pima County Republican Party, just to speak and talk about what political parties do. And, so many people don't understand that still at the core of this is political parties and how they behave. And that, in fact, you're a PC, and then you're a state PC, and then you go to the national convention and you help decide who's going to be president. We had people from the utilities, the ACC, Leah Marcus Peterson, Karen Caesar from CAP, Tim Tamir from Water. A really good session was Colleen Mathis, who, of course, was on the redistricting commission. That's going to be quite the battle this year. I don't know that we'll do as well as we did last time. I think the Republicans are much more attuned and aware this time. So that's going to be an ongoing battle that I'm sure we'll all be watching over the course of this next year. Then we had folks come in and talk about how you message, how you fundraise, how you walk. We had a full day on media where we had Sarah Gasson and Tim Steller and Bud Foster and a whole series of people. We had a day on initiatives. We had Beth Lewis from Red for Ed and a bunch of people who'd worked on the Tucson initiatives. And so on and on. And so we had our first class. We graduated 12. We're watching all of them and trying to stay in touch. I don't want to point anybody out, but I think one of them may be on the call, Nicole Barraza. So if you see her on the call, she just waved at you. And we're about to start our second class with about 12 or 13 young students. I call them young. And that's been really fun and exciting and great to do. And that's something I'm really charged up about. one of the things about being mayor and not being mayor, when you talk to people who've been mayors, is it is like a whole devolution process. You go from, if you're doing it the right way, being busy 24/7 to not being busy 24/7, and from everybody wanting to talk to you to not that many people wanting to talk to you. And so one of the things that I did do was, I'm sure you saw, and hopefully all voted yes on the Pima bond initiative. So I ran that for Pima College, and they came to me about 4 or 5 months in advance, which isn't very long to run a countywide bond initiative. And we did a great job. We raised a whole lot of money, which spoke to the good that Pima and the reputation they've now got in the community, and what they're doing as a college. And we won that 70% to 30%. We had the largest margin of any election in the state. So that's always fun, something I like to do. And the other thing that I really wanted to do coming out of the mayor's office, because I still don't think we're as strong as we need to be in this region, is work on economic development. And so I've now partnered with Pima College to kind of help use Pima as a lever for economic development in this region. They've got programs in engineering and advanced manufacturing, aviation, automotive, building and construction, turn out a whole lot of people for our healthcare community. They've got an IT and cybersecurity section, hospitality, public safety. And the idea is to bring in companies and essentially get them to help support our local students and say, look, in exchange for providing you a workforce, you can provide a company here in Tucson. So we're just getting started on that, but that's pretty exciting. And then the final thing that I'll talk about is something that we did 2 years ago, and we weren't able to do it last year because of COVID. And now, of course, everybody's kind of back into this Zoom mode. We're going to do what we did 2 years ago, which was called Innovative Cities Day, and bring speakers from around the country in to talk about how you, at the time it was how to build your downtown and the surrounding area. Now it'll be how do you rebuild and how do you reboot after what we're coming out of. Probably our downtown has been hurt, or downtowns around the country have been hurt as much as any one particular area because of this pandemic. So we're looking to have somebody from the Pew Charitable Trust, some people from Brookings, some people from Gensler, and some former mayors who have been successful come in. And that is set for April 16th. And if you want more information, I can get you that. But that kind of gives you an idea of what I've been doing. And I'm happy to answer any questions about anything I used to say, from potholes to pensions. But I'll warn you that, my first answer is that when you leave office, first of all, when you're not there in the middle of it, it's a little hard to judge what's actually going on. And I think people need to be cautious about that. I think, people always have their opinions, but unless you know all the facts. And I happened to leave in December of 2019, and COVID started in March of 2020. And the world really changed a lot in that last year. There's just no question about it. And so how electeds are being able to respond or not respond, we all have our ideas about that. And I certainly have mine. But anyway, with that, I'll close my remarks, and I'm happy to take questions or comments. Oh, look at the chat room. Uh-oh, I better go there. Is the new independent member of the IRC really independent? Well, that is a really good question, isn't it? As I kind of said in my remarks, I don't think that the Republicans are, we kind of caught them sleeping last time. And in many respects, and as it turned out, the independent, ended up being our independent. She really was independent. And part of this is getting the idea that, but I can tell you what Colleen has said. She has said, because I don't know if you know her story, she had to board up her house and have private security from all the threats she was getting. And, Arizona's looked at it as a model for redistricting because we've taken it away from the legislature and given it to this independent committee. Well, when there's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans and 1 independent, all the heat goes on the independent because, it'd be nice if people would be a little more fair about this, but the Democrats tend to skew one way and the Republicans tend to skew another way, and that independent makes the vote. So what Colleen's suggestion is instead of a 5-person committee with 2 R's, 2 D's, and an I, you have a 9-person committee with 3 R's, 3 I's, and 3 D's and 3 I's, because that would take the heat off that one person and really create that group of 3. What little I know about the independent is that she's a psychologist from Chandler, and that she had, shown, for instance, if you're a PC, you can't be on this committee whether you're a D or an R, right? So, sometimes the independents are people who have been blank slates. Have they really been that blank? The 2 things we know about her are that she gave, I don't know how much money, but at least several $1,000s to Governor Ducey, and that she's an active member in the Israel America PAC, which tends to lean conservative, but it leans conservative about Israel. So I think, depending who the 5 finalists were, I think her pitch was, I'm a psychologist. I expect to be able to bring people together. If a vote's 3-2, I failed, but we'll see. Last time we did really well with our congressional delegation. Obviously, we have a 5-4 split Democrat in a state that's moderately purple at this point. But the state legislature is really where so much law is made that affects us. And that legislature is incredibly gerrymandered as it is now. I mean, we worked really hard this last election. This was an election where, you've got Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. You expect to win things. And although we did well at the top of the ticket, we didn't really we picked up 1 seat out of 90 in the legislature. And that's because it is so gerrymandered. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. So there's me just going on and on.
A number of questions, Jonathan.
Do you want to just feed them? You want to feed them to me, Larry? And that way I don't have to. Okay.
Also, if you want to ask your question live, go down to the bottom of the screen and there's a little smiley face with a plus sign on it. Click on that. It's called participants, and you'll see an option there to raise your hand and you can ask it live. So I see we have a question from Robert Bulacek. Bob, did you want to ask your question live?
Thank you very much. I'm interested in what makes the difference in cities' ability to actually pass policy change. Cities love to set goals and then ignore them afterwards. And other cities actually get stuff done. There's a city in Colorado that just said they're going to electrify their entire fleet, light passenger vehicles and buses. There's other cities that have banned new fossil gas in new construction. I'm impressed by actual policy changes more than I am by just having these lofty goals. What makes the difference when it comes to actually implementing those things?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Robert. And in fact, when I was mayor, I tried not to, promise things that I couldn't do, And electeds tend to do that. They just do, you know, and whether it's necessarily wrong, you know, to have ambitions and to have goals, there's nothing wrong with that. And to set forth platforms and use it kind of as a bully pulpit, there's nothing wrong with that. But I can tell you it's really two things. One is fiscal, okay? The city, and it depends on the city you're in, okay? But in Tucson, the city budget is limited in the sense that it's new revenue only comes along if there's more sales tax, if there's more state shared revenue, if there's a grant, okay? And that's about it. You know, there's fees, but those are generally not, you know, the transit system right now, they're not even charging for bus fare, but it doesn't pay for itself. The water system does. That's a whole different thing. And so it's fiscal. So for instance, when the whole Trump immigration thing started and people were like, look, we need money to defend immigrants or non-citizens. And Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles, my friend, said, I'm going to set up a $20 million fund to do that. Okay. And of course, I start getting phone calls. Where's our fund? The city of Tucson has no money for a fund like that. I mean, the city of Tucson doesn't have money for any fund like that. Now, one of the things that the current administration did, and I'm not sure how they did it, but it was a good thing, was they went out and found a private donor for a substantial amount of money to help solely with immigrant issues. Well, so in a city like Tucson, you really do have to partner with the private sector to see additional money because it's a bit of a zero-sum game. And you can say, you know, here's a really great project. I'll give you one you're probably interested in. TP, putting, you know, power poles down Campbell Avenue. Well, God dang it, city, why don't you give $6 million to help put those poles underground? And I know that's not where the folks who are against it are going. I'm just using that as an example. Well, okay, great. But where's that $6 million coming from? Is it coming from police? Is it coming from fire? Is it coming from parks? So that's number one. It's fiscal, and it really is. The second, which when I say I learned a lot of this teaching the course, is the federal system is really pretty simple, was built simply, right, in 1776. The federal government reserved a few powers to itself, which really had to do with interstate commerce and military, and then gave everything to the states, okay? So really the power is with the state, okay? There was no such thing as cities or counties then in the system. And so cities and counties derive their power from the states, okay? And there's a couple ways it works, but if you live in a state where the state legislature thinks it's a good idea for cities and counties to experiment, okay, and sort of be those laboratories of democracy, cities get to do more, okay? But as you know, and I know Patsy's on the call knows too, in the environmental field, when cities have tried to do things like I think Phoenix wanted to do, I think it's back up in the bill this session, but good luck, wanted to do audits, you know, energy audits on volunteered to go out and do energy audits, okay? Or make a ban on plastic bags. All the legislature has to do is say, nope, as a matter of statewide interest, this is something we don't want in this state. And cities are then, and by the way, this goes on all over the United States. We love to bang on the Arizona state legislature. This happens in every state in the country. So it depends, you know, right now, if you're in Washington or Oregon or maybe Minnesota or Massachusetts, traditionally, they let cities do a lot more. But I think 38 states right now have houses, legislatures that are not controlled by, I'll say, a party that generally goes that way. And so it gets difficult. And Robert, that's really the two things. And people have to know that, you know, and they have to go to the right place. And that's part of what, you know, teaching this is all about, is like, you know, it's great to be able to say things. What's the most effective way to get them done? And it will always be with state legislatures. As much as I love cities, and there's another whole reason to be an elected in a city or a county, because it's how do you get things done efficiently and administratively efficiently. Making those policy changes are always going to be at the state level. All right. Another question? I see hands up.
Yeah, we have a question from Jacqueline Romer about schools. Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm fairly new to local politics. I'm very surprised. I'm impressed. It's a fantastic presentation. I didn't expect so much emphasis on education, which I'm delighted to see. My question involves being so better informed on global and national news, especially over watching what's happening in the government. I wonder, is it a taboo subject locally to begin educating people about white supremacy, to use the word, to address it? Is it the thing in the room that's not said? I was curious about your perspective on that and how that could be addressed.
No, it's not taboo by any means. I think that what we've seen over the last few months, has clearly put it at the top of our national consciousness. When Donald Trump was first elected and that rhetoric came into the mainstream and was given sort of support in Tucson and around the country, and from my understanding, we're seeing it a little bit again, we saw a big spike in hate crimes in the local community. And so we started a campaign, and it was in conjunction with the YWCA, with the police department, called Stop the Hate. And we did what we could to, first of all, educate people. If you see something, this is what you do. Even in fact, how you deal with people, face to face. But where to call. Sometimes educating within the police department. Okay. There's been a lot that's going on. We have a really progressive police chief here, which has been helpful. It's kept us a little ahead of things, although, when you have 900 officers, things will happen. It's just, the situations are tough, but educating officers as to what a hate crime looks like. But part of that real challenge now is going beyond that, because what we're seeing, it's gotten allowed, has always been part of what has been in this country. It just has. And it hasn't ever been given a majority. But one of the real challenges is with technology, because now it is so simple to get on the web and go viral with something. So my personal experience, and I actually got in one of these books, so it made me think like it might have actually been a big deal. At the time, I tried to ignore it. We had a QAnon guy here who decided that since my last name was Rothschild, I was part of the international conspiracy with George Soros and Hillary Clinton and others. And, said that I was part of a sex ring, child molesting ring. And today, I think if I was still sitting there, I think I would have taken a different approach. But this was kind of before this stuff was really known. And they shut down the city's email system for 2 days with all the hate mail and threats that I got. Okay. And so that stuff, and I even got New York law firms visited me about suing the guy. He ended up getting on top of a tower at a cement factory down on the south side of town with a rifle and wouldn't come down. And his big mistake was when he doxed the sheriff's department. It was okay to dox the electeds, but when he doxed the sheriff's department, they did not take kindly to that. But so the question is, how do we deal with the technology end of it and still have, First Amendment rights, right? And how do we deal with these people themselves? Because, it's one thing, and then look at the United States Congress, you've got.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. I lived in Oklahoma for decades, and I know that these people were always there. They collected in enclaves.
Right.
Right. So is that being addressed at all? And I
also, so without getting more detail, I'll go on the next question is, local police departments watch that.
Okay.
Okay. And you know, we're sure seeing it now in the January 6th thing. It's great to be online, but if you go over the edge, it's really easy to follow you online and see where you're at. So they watch this stuff online. And I know people don't like sometimes to hear that, oh, you know, the government is watching us. Well, some people, you know, yeah, it needs to be addressed as domestic terrorism because that's what it is.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there you are. White fragility from Patsy.
Got a
So,
question here from Maureen Saltz. Go ahead, Maureen, unmute yourself and ask away.
When you were recruiting businesses to Tucson, what were the major objections why companies decided not to relocate here?
so generally people really love Tucson. You have great weather. You have, it's just interesting and something I hadn't thought about at the time, but you do think about it. Great, you know, you don't have natural disasters. You don't have earthquakes. You don't have tornadoes. You don't have fires. You know, you don't have flooding. And that's important to a lot of companies. The workforce is always an issue, but so for instance, when Amazon did their thing and everybody was like, oh, go get Amazon. Well, you know, 50,000 new people in a community that doesn't have the housing infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure, but 50,000 are usually, you know, that's a mega. It's usually you're looking at 1,000 people. And, but I will tell you that companies love Tucson because it's a great place to live for all the reasons you love it. Two things. It's hard to convince companies when you're 50th or 51st in the country in education funding per pupil that you have a good education system, you know, whether you do or you're not. And, you know, and I was in the position of trying to advocate for. So, you know, what you do is you try to point out, one, that there are some very good schools, two, that the public school system is doing a really good job, but it's still with what it has. Okay. And people, even executives, they're very concerned about the education system because they may have kids. The people they're going to bring here have kids and they want that. And they want that good workforce. So education's one. The second one is, and this is, this is the big conversation these days. I literally had conversations with companies where they say, we want to come to Tucson. Okay. And we're ready to come here. Louisiana has offered us $15 million. Mayor, what do you have for us? Well, I don't really have that money. Now the state has some money, and let's go talk to the state, but the state's funds at about $20 million. So places like Louisiana, Texas, Nevada, California that have really big funds for this tend to, when it comes down to the final decision making, tend to win. That doesn't mean we can't win. It doesn't mean we haven't won. But I will tell you, when Caterpillar came here, we did a thing where we just got all the employees on a call. This was before Zoom, but we got on a call. And literally they were asking about rattlesnakes and about what you do. By the way, at that time, there were some about what about those bad immigrants, So there's things you can overcome easily enough. But the real structural ones have to do with perception about education system, a little bit of workforce development, and what we can do in the way of giving them the incentives and bonuses. And you can say those are terrible things, but if you want to get companies to the community, you're going to do some of that. And you want to be reasonable. I mean, I think what was the other big one? Tesla. Because we actually got in the finals for Tesla. That was another whole story that we don't have time for today. But ultimately, when Nevada got Tesla, and I looked at what Nevada had done to get Tesla there, I said, if we deeded them the state, would we have had enough? So I mean, there does come a level where it doesn't make sense to play, but you got to play a little.
All right, we have a question from Christina and Steve Early. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Okay, hi. Thank you, sir, for being here. We really appreciate it. And there just happens to be two of us here, so we're going to ask you two questions.
Oh, okay.
My first
That's up to Larry.
Oh, okay. We can get away with it, I think. Just real quick, do you have a candidate in mind to run for governor in 2022?
So my candidate, who hasn't said he's going to do it, is Greg Stanton. I ran with Greg. I was a mayor with Greg. Greg would make a great governor, and I think he can win. So keep that in mind. That's not to say there won't be others. You're not supposed to mention the names of others, but there's other good candidates. Katie Hobbs, I know has maybe shown an interest, and she could potentially be a good candidate. She certainly won a statewide office. I don't think she'll do it. Kate Gallego's name has been mentioned. She's a very good mayor in Phoenix. But I think Greg should be the front runner, but we'll see how that plays out. And again, I say that he hasn't announced his candidacy by any means. And quite frankly, I think a lot of it will come down to redistricting. The Republicans are definitely targeting his district, so he'll take it all into account, I'm sure.
Okay, and then Steve's got a question for you.
Hi, sir. I've met you before a couple of times, and it's great to see you again. Thank you. And this is kind of local. I believe you were part of the expansion of the zoo, which my wife and I have been members of for many, many years, and we love it. Okay. We think it's the best thing that the city has done in a long time. And I was just wondering your take on it.
So I was just on the phone this morning. There's a bit of a hoorah about where the zoo is expanding over to Barnum Hill. And so I was trying to go back from my recollection. When the zoo came to the council and said, we'd like you to put this on the ballot, we chose not to because, as I was saying to Robert earlier, our funds are so limited that when you take a little money out, it means harder to get money for other things. What the zoo came up with was a proposal that was 1/10 of a cent for 10 years. And that was really smart. It wasn't a big chunk, but that adds up to a bunch of money. That'll add up to probably over that 10 years, $50 million. And it was for a set period of time. And they did a really good job. The council stayed pretty neutral on it. I think Kozaczek was a big proponent in the end. And they passed it by, I think, 800, 900 votes. So that, that really does allow the zoo to go to that next level. Mm-hmm. And I think they will. They've been really thought out for the most part about what they're going to do. The controversy now is, well, who said they could take Barnum Hill? And that's the little area just north of the big lake at Reed Park. And that's a good question, which I don't remember the answer to. I know that the zoo brought a master plan, and I think the council approved that. I know the zoo talked about expanding out of its footprint, and I just don't have the recollection of where that conversation went. So, but overall, having any kind of civic facility that is a strong one, whether it's a music hall, a symphony hall, a convention center, done right, an arts center, which is something our community isn't as strong on in terms of a civics. And when I say an arts center for artists to go and work, is good for the community. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other questions, Larry?
I had a question about who do you see as being the Republican who's going to run against Mark Kelly in 2 years?
That's a good question, isn't it?
Ducey has dropped out, and who knows? Maybe Kelly Ward will run.
Yeah. Now the Republicans don't confide in me as much as they probably should, so I really couldn't tell you exactly. Everybody talks about Mark Brnovich. Okay, he's the Attorney General. He's done some horrible things, and he's done some okay things. I don't see him as a particularly charming candidate, but he seems to be the lead for governor. There's a woman whose name escapes me, who is very wealthy. She's, either was the principal or the wife of the principal of one of the largest companies in Arizona. And her name is out there, is someone who could, that's a good, you don't have to be charming to run for office in the Republican Party. That's a good point. Her name's out there, and for the life of me, I can't think of it as we sit here. But you can, there it is, Robeson Taylor. Thank you, Lucy. So that's, if you've seen Robeson Homes, that's, I think that's where that comes from. Self-funders can do okay. Ultimately, it's a question of what they can put together and how much a party will get behind them. And the Republicans, as much as we as Democrats have some issues now between what I'd call the moderate Democrats and the left Democrats, it's nothing compared to what's going on in the Republican Party. I mean, God dang, when you censor Cindy McCain, Jeff Flake, and Doug Ducey at your state meeting, I mean, that's like, you're pretty well signaling that there's a lot of people out there that, now, listen, as Democrats, we've come close. I remember last year, the state party was thinking about censoring Kirsten Sinema, and her response was, please. So I think sometimes political parties, they're the most active of the active, and unless they can keep that governor on themselves, and I'm hoping, and I could be wrong about this, that Trump is just this anomaly that isn't going to happen again, but we're going to see. That's why we're all involved, to try to make sure things like that don't happen.
All right. Another question is, what is your impression of the county's role in the vaccination program? Is there anything that could be done better?
Well, I don't know about, look, it's critical, the county has the health department, the state has a health department, the county has it. And this is where federalism starts to play. The county has a health department, the state has a health department, the federal government's, got the budget. The state could, and they did it, and they're about back in session, they could allocate and tax so that we can have the ability at least to purchase more vaccine, have more workers, have more contact tracing. The state can do that. Now, the state has expenditure limitations as well, but they've got some room. The real job of the county government, and it could be the city government, but in this case, it's the county government. So the city people can talk like they want, and it's nice for them to do so. But this is really a county job because they have a health department, is the administration of it. And they can only do so much as the funds that they have. And, what we are seeing is a TMC, if you go there, they treat you really well. If you go to Banner and you go there and they treat you really well. You go down to Keno, they've got a center down there, they treat you really well. But you can only, vaccinate as many people as you have vaccines for. You can only have a online system for reservations that works as well as the system that's set up and the people you have behind it working it. And so I'm sure the county folks are, Dr. Garcia is a pro's pro, and now we've got Matt Hines, the doctor, and I'm sure they're going to do as well as they can, but they can only do with what they have. And this rollout, hopefully, Biden's made it very clear that that's priority number one, is getting these vaccines out to the states and the states out to the counties. And that's what's got to happen.
What about the problem of excess vaccines being thrown away at the end?
Yeah. So these, again, that's, sometimes people, and I think electeds make this mistake too, we're the government and we're here to help, and we can solve problems. Okay. I think this has been a really good lesson to everybody about the limitations of government, and not just the limitations of government, but the limitations of government when you go for, I always like to market to 1980. That's my prejudice, Ronald Reagan. When you go to a system of government that really is a minimal system. So that may work, and people might notice the difference until something like a pandemic comes along. And all of a sudden, government don't have the infrastructure to do everything they can. But let's say a government is perfect, okay, which is never going to happen, okay? These vaccines, they have a real life to them. And, if you don't use them within X amount of hours from the time you get them, they're not any good. And so you have to really have that system set up. The other day over at the TCC, the county had a glitch in their system and they had 135 people come in at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's the city running it because it's the TCC. They're sitting there waiting. Nobody's here. Uh-oh, now there's 135 people when there should be 3 people. And they ended up essentially calling as many people as they could that they knew were in line and get out as many as they could. But at the end of every day, there's going to be those kind of problems. And those are the kind of problems that you just have to, as a government person, I used to tell, like, the newspaper guys would come in and they'd be like, we're going to get you. We're going to find out what's wrong. And I'd be like, look, to get off of that, if we find something that's wrong, we'll tell you, and we'll tell you how we're going to fix it. And we did, and we got that trust going even with the newspapers. Now, whether that always stays through administrations or that's the way the county operates, but that's the way government should operate. And then, you can report it, but all I can say is, look, we're going to do as good as we can with the cards we've been dealt, and so that's what happens. Okay. One more.
The one, I think we've exhausted all.
Exhausted them? Good, because you guys exhausted me. But anyway.
Well, I wanted to thank you for your time. You've got an audience full of supporters here. What would you, if you could wrap up the program and tell us what you would like people and Democrats of Greater Tucson to do next to support the city?
Well, I don't want to sound like George Bush, but go out and buy things. That's city sales tax. That's what I always used to say is to visitors would come in. I'd say, go out and go shopping and go to the restaurants and go drinking, because that's the way I can pay my police and fire. But I think more to the reality of what we can all do is, and people I know on this call do it, is we just have to be, God, what's the word? Diligent it's more than diligent now. It's kind of like, what's that? Well, persistent for sure. I mean, one of the things I tell these young people in these sessions is this is a long run game. If you think you're going to have a goal and solve it in a year or two, you're probably in the wrong place. And so for all of us, we know that this is something that we just have to stay at and watch for. And when we see things are wrong, speak out about them, at least to our circle of friends. And I'll tell you, my last thing I'll say is, when I was running for mayor the first time, I went to see all the former mayors, and one of them was George Miller, who I know a lot of you probably knew. And so George said to me, like, everybody asks you that question. It's the right question. Why do you want to do this? And I had some pretty Pollyannish answer about how I wanted to help the community and everything make some change. And George said, well, I don't know why you want to do that. He goes, all you got to do is get 10 of your friends together and go down to the city council and just yell at them and they'll do what you want. and which kind of almost turned out to be true, not entirely. And so really, I mean, it really is, when you see that issue out there, get some people together and let your, electeds really do want to hear from people, and they want to hear from people they don't necessarily hear from all the time on issues they don't necessarily hear from all the time. And that's the way a democracy is supposed to work. And so that's what I'd say is stay involved and stay communicating with your electeds. Yep, that's it.
Well, thanks very much, Jonathan. We really appreciate you sharing your time and thoughts with us. I want to wish you all the best in your future. And thanks again from Democrats of Greater Tucson. We'll see everybody next Monday at noon. And one last thing, don't forget, if you haven't renewed your membership, go ahead and join at the Democrats of Greater Tucson website. And with that, we're going to say so long.
So long, everybody.
Take care, Jonathan.
Thank you, Larry.